Millionaire yells at little girl in orphanage. Where did you get that teddy bear? It's not yours. The morning was cold, with a light fog covering the city streets, giving the day a melancholic feel. Jack, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and shoulders weighed down by memories, drove his car toward the St. Teresa orphanage. With every mile, his heart beat faster, mixing anxiety with the sadness that had accompanied him for the past decade. 10 years had passed since his daughter Emily disappeared, and not a day went by that he didn't think about her. He parked the car in front of the orphanage, an old but well-maintained building with red brick walls and large windows. He carried with him a large box full of toys, an attempt to bring joy to the children and perhaps find some solace for his own broken heart. The orphanage director, a kind woman named Sister Mary, greeted him with a warm smile. "Good morning, Jack. The children are very excited to see the toys you brought," she said, guiding him down the main hallway. As they walked, Jack observed the colorful murals on the walls, painted by the children themselves, depicting scenes of happiness and hope. They entered a large room where several children were playing and laughing. The sound of innocence was almost overwhelming for Jack, a painful reminder of his own daughter's laughter. He knelt beside the box and began distributing the toys. The children crowded around him, their eyes shining with anticipation. Among the crowd, a girl caught his attention. She was about 10 years old with curly brown hair and big, expressive eyes. What really made him stop was the teddy bear she was holding so tenderly. It was identical to the one Emily had, a gift he had given her on her 3rd birthday. "Where did you get that teddy bear?" Jack asked, his voice trembling with emotion and disbelief. The girl, frightened by the intensity of the question, took a step back, clutching the teddy bear to her chest. Sister Mary quickly approached, trying to calm the situation. "It's okay, Lily. This is Mr. Jack. He's just curious about your teddy bear," she said gently. Lily looked at Jack with a confused expression and timidly replied, "I've always had him. Mrs. Sophia gave him to me when I came here." Jack felt the world spin at those words. Hope, a feeling he had almost forgotten, began to sprout in his heart. He knew he had to investigate more about this Mrs. Sophia and how Emily's teddy bear ended up in Lily's hands. "Sister Mary, who is Mrs. Sophia?" Jack asked, trying to stay calm. "Sophia is a volunteer who works with us. She brings children she finds in difficult situations. Lily arrived here about 5 years ago and we've been taking care of her since," the director explained. "Do you know where I can find Sophia?" Jack insisted, the urgency in his voice no longer disguised. "She comes here every Friday. I can give you her address if you prefer," Sister Mary offered. Jack nodded, his thoughts swirling. The possibility of finally finding Emily left him both hopeful and terrified. He knew he was about to embark on a journey that could change everything. Determined to follow every lead, he prepared for whatever lay ahead. The next day, Jack woke up before dawn, with Sophia's address written on a piece of paper he held as if it were a key to his destiny. Anxiety and hope mingled as he drove through the still sleeping city streets. He arrived at a small brick house surrounded by a well-kept garden. Taking a deep breath, he knocked on the door. After a few moments, the door opened to reveal a middle-aged woman with gray hair and a kind look. She smiled politely at Jack. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice soft. "I'm Jack. Sister Mary from St. Teresa Orphanage gave me your address. I'm looking for information about a girl named Lily and the teddy bear she has," he explained, trying to control the emotion in his voice. Sophia's smile faded and was replaced by a serious expression. She opened the door fully and gestured for Jack to come in. The house was cozy, decorated with old furniture and photos of smiling children. "Please, have a seat," said Sophia, indicating a nearby armchair. "May I ask why you're so interested in Lily's teddy bear?" Jack sat down, taking a moment to gather his thoughts before responding. "My daughter, Emily, disappeared 10 years ago. The teddy bear Lily has is identical to the one Emily had. I'm trying to understand how it ended up in Lily's hands," he explained, feeling the words weigh heavily on his chest. Sophia sighed deeply, clearly touched by Jack's story. I understand. Lily was brought to the orphanage by me about 5 years ago. I found her alone in a park holding that teddy bear. I didn't know where she came from, and she couldn't tell me much about her life before that, Sophia said, sadness in her eyes. Jack felt a mix of despair and renewed hope. The girl and the teddy bear were the first concrete clues he had in years. Do you remember any details about the park, or anything that might help me find more information? He asked, almost pleading. Sophia thought for a moment, trying to recall anything useful. The park was in the northern part of the city near an old playground. I remember she was sitting on one of the swings, alone and scared. There was no one else around, and she seemed to be waiting for someone, Sophia said, her voice thick with emotion. Jack thanked Sophia deeply for her help and left the house, his mind buzzing with new information. The park in the north of the city would be his next destination. Determined to follow every lead to the end, he felt a growing determination in his chest. The park was exactly as Sophia had described, an old place with a playground that seemed to have seen better days. Jack walked around, trying to imagine where Lily might have been found. He asked a few local residents if they remembered a lost child from 5 years ago, but no one had any useful information. After hours of searching, he sat on one of the benches, frustrated and tired. It was then that he noticed an old missing poster on a nearby tree. Approaching it, he saw that the poster was faded by time but still legible. The photo showed a small girl with a sad expression, holding a teddy bear. Jack's heart nearly stopped. It was Emily. The poster was dated 10 years ago, but the park was the same. He was in the right place. With a new sense of urgency, Jack took a photo of the poster with his phone and decided he needed to find someone who could provide more information about that period. Determined, he got back into his car and started driving through the city, looking for any clue that would lead him to his daughter. He knew he was closer than ever, and nothing would stop him from finding Emily. With the photo of the old missing poster in hand, Jack decided the next step would be to go to the local police station. He knew that even after all these years, Emily's disappearance case might have archived information he had not yet explored. He drove to the station, an imposing stone building, and entered with determination. "Can I help you?" asked the officer at the reception, looking up from a pile of papers. "My name is Jack. My daughter, Emily, disappeared 10 years ago. I found a missing poster in the park in the north of the city, and believe there might be more archived information about her case," Jack explained, trying to stay calm. The officer looked at him sympathetically and signaled for him to wait a moment. Soon after, a detective named Robert appeared and invited Jack to follow him to his office. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Jack. I'll check the archives to see what we can find," said Robert as he sat down in front of a computer. Jack watched impatiently as Robert typed and navigated through the records. After a few minutes of searching, the detective found Emily's case file. Here it is. Emily's case was filed as an unresolved disappearance. There are some notes about previous investigations, but nothing that led to a concrete discovery, Robert explained, flipping through the documents. "Can I see those files?" Jack asked, the anxiety evident in his voice. Robert nodded and handed him a folder full of reports, photos, and notes. Jack carefully went through each page, looking for something that might have been overlooked. Then he found a note about a woman named Margaret, who had been seen in the park at the time of the disappearance. "Who is Margaret?" Jack asked, looking up from the document. Margaret was a woman who used to frequent the park often. She was questioned at the time, but there was no evidence of her involvement. However, she disappeared from the area shortly after, which raised suspicions, Robert explained. Jack felt a new wave of hope mixed with despair. The girl and the teddy bear were the first concrete clues he had in years. "Do you remember any details about the park or anything that might help me find more information?" he asked, almost pleading. Sophia thought for a moment, trying to recall anything useful. "The park was in the northern part of the city, near an old playground. I remember she was sitting on one of the swings, alone and scared. There was no one else around, and she seemed to be waiting for someone," Sophia said, her voice thick with emotion. Jack thanked Sophia deeply for her help and left the house, his mind buzzing with new information. The park in the north of the city would be his next destination. Determined to follow every lead to the end, He felt a growing determination in his chest. The park was exactly as Sophia had described, an old place with a playground that seemed to have seen better days. Jack walked around, trying to imagine where Lily might have been found. He asked a few local residents if they remembered a lost child from 5 years ago, but no one had any useful information. After hours of searching, he sat on one of the benches, frustrated and tired. It was then that he noticed an old missing poster on a nearby tree. Approaching it, he saw that the poster was faded by time but still legible. The photo showed a small girl with a sad expression, holding a teddy bear. Jack's heart nearly stopped. It was Emily. The poster was dated 10 years ago, but the park was the same. He drove to the station, an imposing stone building, and entered with determination. "Can I help you?" asked the officer at the reception, looking up from a pile of papers. "My name is Jack. My daughter Emily disappeared 10 years ago. I found a missing poster in the park in the north of the city and believe there might be more archived information about her case," Jack explained, trying to stay calm. The officer looked at him sympathetically and signaled for him to wait a moment. Soon after, a detective named Robert appeared and invited Jack to follow him to his office. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Jack. I'll check the archives to see what we can find," said Robert as he sat down in front of a computer. Jack watched impatiently as Robert typed and navigated through the records. After a few minutes of searching, the detective found Emily's case file. "Here it is. Emily's case was filed as an unresolved disappearance. There are some notes about previous investigations, but nothing that led to a concrete discovery," Robert explained, flipping through the documents. "Can I see those files?" Jack asked, the anxiety evident in his voice. Robert nodded and handed him a folder full of reports, photos, and notes. Jack carefully went through each page, looking for something that might have been overlooked. Then he found a note about a woman named Margaret, who had been seen in the park at the time of the disappearance. "Who is Margaret?" Jack asked, looking up from the document. Margaret was a woman who used to frequent the park often. She was questioned at the time, but there was no evidence of her involvement. However, she disappeared from the area shortly after, which raised suspicions, Robert explained. Jack felt a new wave of hope. If Margaret was in the park at the time and then disappeared, she might have crucial information about Emily's whereabouts. "Do you know where I can find Margaret now?" Jack asked, trying to hide the urgency in his voice. "I don't have that information at the moment, but I can look through more recent records. She may have moved to another city or state," Robert said, starting a new search on his computer. After a few minutes, Robert found a recent address for Margaret in a suburb not too far away. Jack thanked the detective deeply and left the station with the new address in hand. He knew he was closer than ever to uncovering the truth. Jack drove quickly to the suburb, a quiet neighborhood with cozy houses and well-tended gardens. He found Margaret's house, a small wooden residence with colorful flowers in the garden. Taking a deep breath, he knocked on the door, his heart pounding. After a few moments, a gentle-looking woman with gray hair and eyes that reflected a life full of stories opened the door. "Can I help you?" she asked with a welcoming smile. "My name is Jack. I'm looking for my daughter, Emily, who disappeared 10 years ago. I heard you were in the park at the time of her disappearance. I need to know if you have any information about her," Jack said, almost breathless. Margaret's smile slowly faded, replaced by an expression of surprise and empathy. "Please come in. We have much to talk about," she said, opening the door fully. Jack entered the house, anxious to hear what Margaret had to say. He knew he was closer to the truth than ever before, and nothing would stop him from finding his daughter. Margaret led Jack to the living room, a cozy space decorated with photos of landscapes and travel souvenirs. They sat in opposite armchairs, the silence filling the space between them as Margaret gathered her thoughts. "I know this must be hard for you, Jack. I remember Emily and the pain I felt upon hearing of her disappearance. I was in the park that day, as you said, but I couldn't provide much useful information to the police at the time," Margaret began, her voice soft. "Any detail, no matter how small, could make a difference now. I just want to find her, to know she's okay," Jack said, hope mixed with despair in his voice. Margaret nodded, understanding the urgency of the situation. She stood up and went to a shelf, Retrieving an old photo album, she handed it to Jack. This album contains photos from my walks in the park. I always like to photograph nature and the people around me. Maybe there's something in there that can help, Margaret explained. Jack began to flip through the album, each page revealing moments frozen in time. There were photos of trees, flowers, and children playing in the park. In one of the photos, he saw a small girl with a teddy bear, her back to the camera. "Is this Emily?" he asked, pointing to the photo. Margaret looked at the photo and confirmed with a nod. "Yes, it's her. That photo was taken on the day she disappeared. It was the last time I saw her," Margaret said, sadness in her eyes. Jack continued to look through the photos, feeling hope grow inside him. He reached a photo of a suspicious-looking woman partially hidden behind a tree, watching Emily. "Who is this woman?" he asked, pointing to the figure in the photo. Margaret looked at the image and seemed thoughtful. "I don't know. I never saw her before and I never saw her again. The police never managed to identify her," she replied. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. This woman could be the key to discovering what happened to Emily. He decided he needed to show the photo to Detective Robert and see if he could help identify the mysterious woman. "Margaret, this photo might be the clue I need. I'm going to take it to the police and see if we can find out more about this woman," Jack said. Thanking Margaret deeply, she nodded, wishing him luck and hope in his search. Jack left Margaret's house with a renewed sense of purpose. He felt that he was closer than ever to finding Emily, and he wouldn't rest until she was back in his arms. He drove back to the police station, where he was greeted by Robert. "I found something important," Jack said, showing the photo of the mysterious woman. Robert examined the photo carefully. "I'll see what we can find out about this woman. Maybe there's something in the records that can help us identify her," the detective said, starting his search. Jack waited anxiously as Robert sifted through files and databases. After some time, Robert found a match. "It looks like this woman named Susan has a history of involvement in suspicious disappearance cases. She was questioned several times, but there was never enough evidence to incriminate her," Robert explained. Jack's heart pounded as he heard the name. Susan was the same woman who had brought Lily to the orphanage. He knew this connection couldn't be a coincidence. "Where can I find this Susan?" Jack asked, determined. Robert provided the most recent address he had in the records. Jack thanked him and left immediately, feeling that the truth was finally within reach. Jack drove quickly to the address provided by Robert. He arrived at a simple house a bit secluded from the city, surrounded by trees and dense vegetation. He stopped the car and took a deep breath, preparing himself for the encounter that could change his life. He knocked on the door and waited. After a few moments, a woman opened the door. It was Susan. Her eyes widened when she saw Jack. "Can I help you?" she asked, trying to hide the surprise in her voice. "My name is Jack. I'm looking for my daughter Emily, who disappeared 10 years ago. I know you have information about her. I found a photo of you in the park on the day she disappeared," Jack said firmly. Susan looked visibly nervous but tried to maintain her composure. "I don't know what you're talking about. I only help children in need," she replied, avoiding Jack's gaze. "Susan, I know you brought Lily to the orphanage. She had Emily's teddy bear. Please, tell me the truth," Jack insisted, his voice filled with emotion. Susan sighed deeply, seeming to give in to the pressure. "All right, I'll tell you what I know. I found Lily alone in the park 5 years ago. She was holding the teddy bear and seemed lost and scared. I decided to take her to the orphanage because I thought it was the best for her. I didn't know where she came from, but now I see there must be a connection with your daughter," she admitted, with a tone of guilt. Jack felt a mix of relief and frustration. He was closer to the truth, but there were still pieces missing from the puzzle. "Do you know exactly where Lily was found? Any detail can help me find Emily," he asked, desperate for more information. "I remember she was near an old carousel in the park. There was a group of people, but I couldn't identify anyone who might have been with her. It was all very confusing," Susan explained. Jack thanked Susan and left the house, feeling more determined than ever. He returned to the park, now with a more specific location in mind. The old carousel was still there, a monument to nostalgia and the past. As he walked through the park, Jack noticed an elderly woman sitting on a bench watching the carousel with a thoughtful look. He decided to approach her, hoping she might have seen something in the past. "Hello, Excuse me for disturbing you. I'm looking for information about my daughter who disappeared 10 years ago. Do you come to this park often? He asked, hope in his voice. The woman looked at him and nodded slowly. Yes, I come here almost every day. I remember a little girl who used to play on the carousel. She had a teddy bear. Was she your daughter? She asked with a sad look. Yes, that's my daughter Emily. Do you remember anything else about her? Jack asked, feeling hope revive. I remember a woman who always stayed nearby, watching the girl. She seemed to be waiting for something. I never knew who she was, but I was always bothered by the way she looked at the child, the woman said. Jack thanked her deeply and decided he needed to investigate more about this woman. He knew he was getting closer and closer to the truth. Determined to follow every lead to the end, he returned to the city, resolved to find Emily. Jack drove back to the city, his mind racing with all the new information he had gathered. He decided he needed more help to find Emily and solve the mystery of her disappearance. The first person he thought of was Sister Mary from St. Teresa Orphanage. If anyone could help him connect all the pieces, it was her. When he arrived at the orphanage, Jack was immediately greeted by Sister Mary, who sensed the urgency in his face. Jack, what did you find out? She asked, concerned. I found a woman named Susan who brought Lily to the orphanage. She was in the park on the day Emily disappeared. I also learned that a strange woman was watching my daughter in the park before she disappeared. I need your help to connect these dots and find Emily, Jack explained, his voice trembling with emotion. Sister Mary nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. She led Jack to her office where they began reviewing the orphanage's records, looking for any additional clues that might help. Here are all the records of children brought in by Susan. Let's see if there's anything that can guide us, said Sister Mary, handing a stack of documents to Jack. As he sifted through the papers, Jack found a note about a visit from Margaret to the orphanage a few years ago. Margaret had brought a child named Emily, saying she found her alone and disoriented in the park. Margaret was here with Emily, Jack exclaimed, showing the note to Sister Mary. That confirms that Emily was found and brought to the orphanage, but why didn't she stay here? Sister Mary asked, puzzled. Jack felt a mix of hope and frustration. It was clear that Margaret had a crucial role in Emily's story, but he still needed to understand what happened after she was found. Did Margaret mention anything about where she was going or who she was with? Jack asked, trying to piece together the puzzle. There are no more details here, but maybe Margaret can give us more information. I'll call her and see if we can talk again, suggested Sister Mary. After a brief call, Margaret agreed to meet with Jack and Sister Mary at the orphanage. When she arrived, Jack felt a wave of gratitude and anxiety. He knew he was closer to the truth than ever. Margaret, I need to know what happened to Emily after you found her in the park. Where is she now? Jack asked, trying to stay calm. Margaret looked at Jack with compassion and began to tell her story. I found Emily alone and scared in the park. She couldn't remember where she came from or how she got there. I decided to take her to my home temporarily while I tried to find out more about her family. During that time, I grew attached to her and decided it would be better for Emily to stay with me rather than being taken to an orphanage. I knew it was risky, but I wanted to give her a loving home, Margaret explained, tears in her eyes. Jack felt a mix of relief and anger. He was relieved to know that Emily was alive and well, but angry about being separated from her for so long. Where is Emily now? He asked, his voice trembling. Margaret took a deep breath before responding. Emily has been living with me since then. She's now a teenager, but she always wondered about her family. I was planning to look for you, but I didn't know where to start. Now that you're here, we can finally reunite you, Margaret said, emotional. Jack felt a wave of emotion wash over him. After so many years of searching and pain, he was about to be reunited with his daughter. Sister Mary offered to accompany them to Margaret's house, ensuring everything would go as smoothly as possible. Together, they drove to Margaret's house where Emily was waiting. When Jack saw his daughter for the first time in 10 years, he couldn't hold back his tears. Emily, now a beautiful and confident young girl, ran into her father's arms, crying with joy and relief. Finally reunited, Jack, Emily, and Margaret felt that a new chapter in their lives was beginning. United by love and hope, they knew they could face any challenge that lay ahead. The reunion was an emotional whirlwind for everyone. Emily and Jack hugged for a long time, as if each second could make up for the lost years. Margaret watched the scene with a smile, happy to finally see the family reunited. Sister Mary, witnessing this touching moment, couldn't hold back her tears of joy either. After the intense emotion of the reunion, everyone sat in Margaret's living room. It was a cozy and familiar environment, with walls covered in photos and memories. Emily still held her father's hand, as if afraid he would disappear again. "Emily, I want you to know that I never stopped looking for you. All these years you were always in my thoughts and in my heart," Jack said, his voice choked with emotion. Emily looked at her father, her eyes shining with tears. "I know, Dad. I always knew you would find me. Margaret told me about you and Mom, and I always hoped for the day we would be reunited," Emily responded, squeezing his hand tighter. Margaret smiled and spoke kindly. "Emily is an incredible young girl. She grew up with so much love and hope despite everything that happened. I know it will be a transition for all of us, but I'm here to support you in any way you need," she said sincerely. Sister Mary, who had been observing, suggested something that brought a new light to everyone's eyes. "I think we should celebrate this moment. Let's organize a small party here at the orphanage to celebrate your reunion. The children will be delighted to join, and it will be a wonderful way to start this new chapter," she suggested, excited. The idea was received with enthusiasm, and the preparations for the party began immediately. The orphanage children helped decorate the main hall with colorful balloons and banners, and soon the room was filled with laughter and cheerful conversations. Margaret brought a homemade cake while Jack and Emily helped organize the toys and activities for the children. The party was a success. The children were radiant, running and playing with the new toys that Jack had brought. Emily, smiling widely, mingled with the children, telling stories and playing with them. Jack watched everything with a heart full of joy and gratitude. As the party ended, reality began to set in. Jack knew that the transition would not be easy for Emily, who now had a life and routine with Margaret. They would need time and patience to adjust to this new family dynamic. They decided that Emily would continue living with Margaret for now, while Jack would make frequent visits to strengthen his bond with his daughter. It was important for everyone that Emily did not feel a sudden change in her life. "Emily, I know this may be confusing for you right now, but I want you to know that I'm here for whatever you need. We will get through this together, one step at a time," Jack said, holding his daughter's hands firmly. "I understand, Dad. I really want to spend more time with you and learn more about our family, but I also don't want to leave Margaret. She took care of me all these years," Emily responded with a maturity beyond her years. Margaret, always sensible, suggested a balanced approach. "Let's do this gradually. Emily can spend some days with Jack and some days with me. That way she won't feel divided and can adjust to the new rhythm," she suggested. Everyone agreed with the plan, and so began the first steps of this new phase. Jack dedicated himself to spending as much time as possible with Emily, cherishing every moment to rebuild the bond between father and daughter. They walked in the park, watched movies, and cooked together, creating new memories that helped heal the wounds of the past. As the new routine settled in, Jack couldn't ignore the need to fully understand what had happened in the 10 years of separation. He continued to be intrigued by the mysterious woman who seemed to be involved in Emily's disappearance. He decided to keep investigating with Robert's help. "Robert, I need to know more about this woman, Susan. There's something about her that doesn't sit right. How could she be so involved with missing children without being discovered?" Jack questioned during one of his meetings at the police station. Robert agreed, also feeling there was more to the story than met the eye. "Let's dig deeper. We can review old disappearance cases and see if there's any pattern or connection we can use," he suggested. The investigation revealed that Susan had a history of working with various charity organizations and orphanages, but she always seemed to be involved in complicated cases. Jack and Robert discovered that she used different identities and moved frequently, making it difficult to track her. During one of these investigations, Robert found an old adoption record mentioning Susan as an intermediary. The document was vague but mentioned a woman named Margaret as one of the adoptive parents. "This is interesting. It seems Margaret and Susan have a more connected past than we thought. We need to confront Margaret with this information and understand what really happened, Robert said. Jack, though confused, knew he needed to get answers directly from Margaret. He returned to her house where Emily was spending the day, determined to uncover the truth. When he arrived at Margaret's house, Jack felt a heaviness in his heart. He knew this conversation could change everything. He knocked on the door and was greeted by Margaret with her usual warm smile, but he could see a shadow of concern in her eyes. "Jack, what a surprise. What brings you here?" she asked, trying to keep her composure. "Margaret, we need to talk. There's something important I need to understand about Emily's past and your connection with Susan," he said, entering the house. Margaret sighed and gestured for him to sit down. Emily, sensing the tension, approached and held her father's hand. "Dad, what's going on?" she asked, worried. "Emily, I just need to clarify some things." "Margaret, we found records connecting you to Susan and questionable adoptions. Please, I need you to tell me the truth," Jack insisted. Margaret looked at Emily and then at Jack before beginning to speak. "I knew this day would come. Jack, when I found Emily in the park, I knew she was special. I couldn't leave her alone and defenseless. Susan helped me care for her in the early years, but soon I realized her intentions were not the best. She used children to get money from illegal adoptions. When I figured that out, I cut all ties with her and hid Emily to protect her," Margaret explained, tears in her eyes. Jack was shocked, but also felt a wave of relief knowing that Margaret truly wanted to protect Emily. "You did this to protect my daughter?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Yes, Jack. I love her as if she were my own daughter. I would never do anything to hurt her. I just wanted to give her a safe and loving home," Margaret replied, holding Emily's hand. Emily, who had listened to the whole conversation, hugged Margaret and then her father. "I love you both. I know everything you did was to protect me. We can overcome this together," she said with maturity and love. Jack, Margaret, and Emily knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but they were determined to face all challenges together as a true family. United by love and hope, nothing could separate them again.